My name is Ian Smith. I'm generally regarded as a bit of a rebel. I was the youngest person ever to go into the Rhodesian Parliament. I was 29 years old. And it so happened that in my little hometown of Salukwi, which was a big mining camp, there were people who said, look, surely you don't expect us to vote for this chap Ian Smith. We remember him when he was in junior school here. And now you're asking me to accept him as my member of parliament. Well, it so happened there were a few of my colleagues in the pub at the same time when the nominations had gone forward, who said to me, you know, when he decided to go and fight for the war for Britain, and that was a number of years ago, you didn't complain then, did you? What's your case now? Well, obviously they did not have a case, and that pretty quickly scotched that one.
I think Smith was misunderstood in a lot of ways, but he was genuine. Smith is an African. He understands the African mentality. Now, it wasn't Smith's problem, actually, of what happened in what you call Rhodesia. Smith came in about 1965, after Winston Field. So he was along the system that had been created. And if you look at the development of Rhodesia, Smith contributed enormously onto that. It did not only benefit the whites, it benefited the blacks.
What we believed in was responsible majority rule as opposed to irresponsible majority rule. And I stand by that. I think it is important that before you give a person a vote, you ensure that his roots go down, that he's part of the whole structure of the country. So I stand by what I've said, and I think we can substantiate the fact that the things we did were to the benefit of the black people of our country, more so than anybody else. And I challenge anybody to disagree with that.
There were a lot of attacks, mortar attacks, landmines, ambushes, farm attacks. And our houses had screens against the windows for rockets and mortars. And yes, it just became a part of life. You had curfew, you didn't travel at certain times of the day. You waited for the army to clear the roads first, the farm roads first, before you went down them for landmines. At that stage, the country was terribly united, and I would like to believe that the majority of us believed in what we were doing. We were fighting communism, we were standing up for what we believed in and what we felt was right. And Ian Smith was highly regarded.
In 1975, Smith flew at night to Zambia to offer Nkomo takeover. At that time, the fighting wasn't intense. He sort of said, you take over, we shall support you. Then Nkomo said, I have to bring Mugabe. I don't want to leave Mugabe out. He is going to cause problems for us. He has to come back. Smith said, that's fine. You have to talk. But you take over. That was 1975. And the idea then was put to the Nigerians. Obasanjo was a military ruler in sort of Ghana, in Nigeria at that time. Now, the message was taken to him. The Nigerians agreed. Kaunda, who was sort of Zambia, agreed. But Nyerere refused, because Nyerere wanted Mugabe. So it was Mugabe and Nyerere that refused. The idea was that ZAPU and ZANU were going to go to the elections together. And also it was decided that where there was violence, elections would not be held until the situation was stabilized. So Nkomo went back And then he tried to work with Mugabe, but Mugabe didn't want to work with him.
To begin with, things went well because Mugabe was no fool. He realized it was important to maintain the economy and keep the country expanding. And in any case, he was committed to do that by the Lancaster House Agreement, which said there can be no change in this for at least 7 years, unless you can get 100% support of all the people. Well, no ways would he have been able to have got the support of the white members of Parliament, and also the Matabeles. So we were satisfied that what we were doing was absolutely in keeping with the traditions and the culture and what was expected of us. And Mugabe used to thank me for personally coming to see him and give him the benefit of my advice and to tell him what the white people were thinking. But he only did this for a while because he inherited the best economy in Africa. It was viable. And after 2 years, he quickly changed his mind because he had a lot of money available. He had his commanders in control because he had removed the white commanders who would have taken action against him if he had defied the Lancaster House Agreement before the 7 years went. He removed our commanders and put his commanders in. So he knew that he could defy this. And so he breached the Lancaster House Agreement.
Some horrendous number of Matabele were murdered. Our chief, well, our main assistant on the farm, he was a young boy of 8 or 9 when 5th Brigade moved into his area, and he had been punished by his father because he'd lost some donkeys the day before, and as punishment he had to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and go and find these donkeys. And he got up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and when he got back to his kraal at 3 o'clock in the afternoon with the donkeys, his entire kraal had been murdered. Chickens, dogs, cattle, sheep, goats, his parents, his family. He was the only survivor.
So it gradually got worse and worse until the country is absolutely on the rocks now. And the people are suffering. And this is our hope, that because so many people are suffering, so many people have been persecuted and have been told, get into line or else. They know what or else means.
I got a phone call from the Commercial Farmers Union president, Matabele Land president, to say that Martin had been surrounded and was fighting for his life and fighting a battle. And at 11:30 that morning, the news was broken that he'd been murdered.
Africa is a continent which is subject to a great deal of friction and argument and change. That's part of the world generally, but more so Africa than anywhere else. So because of that, we live in hope. We think that the people there in the end will say we've had enough.
Smith was being realistic. If you give people something before they are ready, they are going to mess it up. And that has happened. If Smith had had the opportunity to work with the people and sort of help bring them up, Zimbabwe would be a better place now. Smith did make it better during his government. There is no reason why he could not do that if he had been allowed to go on.
In the interests of our people and of other people in this part of the world, let's work together. Why have we got to exclude people because of their color? Whether they are white or brown or yellow or even black. Let's just accept that we are all part of Africa, all part of the world. Let's all work together. And the more we can get people to accept that philosophy, I think the greater the hope for the whole world.